I've got answers. It's a Super Bowl mailbag part 2. Let's talk some Chiefs. Welcome back to RGR Football. I am Seth Kaiser, the Chief in the North. You know what? We're going to get right to it because I don't have a lot of time and you guys have a lot of questions. We're in part 2 of our Super Bowl mailbag. You guys know what's going on. It's the Super Bowl. And so you guys had a million questions. I'm going to try to get to every single one of them. Let's just get right into it, shall we? Hey, make sure to do all the YouTube stuff. Like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. What a week to be a Chiefs fan. John Wellesley asks, Dear Sir, would you prefer Mr.? You know what? I'm going to be okay with Sir. Knower of ball, looking back at the Buffalo versus Cincy game, did the snow inhibit the Buffalo defensive line and therefore the Cincinnati O-line performance in the AFC title game was more indicative of what they were and maybe the KCD line lucked out? No, I would say the Cincinnati offensive line lucked out in the snow against Buffalo. I would also note that the Cincinnati offensive line did look better at different times during the season. The Chiefs defensive line has continually looked better and better. I think we're at the point to where the Chiefs defensive line, when you've got the Bills minus Von Miller, is just better. They don't have a superstar. They've got, right now, imagine if you took Chris Jones away from the Chiefs defensive line. That's where the Bills are at. They've got some guys that can play, but not anyone to build it around. And that's problematic. Ed Oliver's maybe the closest thing that they have, but he is no Chris Jones. And so that's where I think that really came into play, is you actually had a superstar as well as multiple guys. And again, you hit the nail on the head in terms of the lack of snow. That always gives an offensive line an advantage. Cameron Combs asked, we talk a lot about how dangerous Andy is with the bye week. Patrick Mahomes' injury against Jacksonville obviously hampered what the offense was going to be that day. But what did you see as far as Big Red Magic in that game with the bye, and what could there be in the Super Bowl that wasn't there against Cincy? I don't know in terms of Jacksonville, because like you said, Mahomes' injury changed everything. It altered everything about the way they were going to operate that offense. I think they were actually going to be kind of a deep shot offense that day. They were starting off running a bunch of deep stuff. It's one of the reasons why there was a little more pressure early in the game than there was later when they converted to kind of the short stuff. I think they were going to attack down the field quite a bit more, but we just never really saw a whole lot of that. Against Cincinnati, one thing that we did see was a very specific game plan to go after them when they went into single high and utilizing Marquez Valdez Scantling to try to attack them in those things. In terms of what they might do in the Super Bowl, man, I don't know. We've been, they're playing a team that's a lot less familiar with them. They played the Eagles last year, but other than that, they just haven't played them in years. So there's so much that they could do, and it's kind of a giant shrug. And that's one of the cool things about having Andy Reid as your coach. You really could get any number of game plans. They don't have the same issue that they did against Tampa Bay, where they were, missing their entire offensive line. They're in a similar position when they were playing the Niners, and the 49ers, had an incredible defense, easily the best in the NFL that year. And they had some stuff juiced up early to try to get them some yards. And then the Niners defense clamped down for time. Look, you watch that Super Bowl, My guess in terms of what Andy has in store, I think we're going to see more stuff for Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore, but that's just a feeling that I have. I guess we'll see what happens. All Juice team, man, I've seen some references to Therese this week, and it's been nice to see. He's very missed. In regards to remarks made on the Tyreek Hill trade, getting more quantity than one high-quality draft pick, will the Chiefs throw a bunch of darts at two different groups in the draft that are needs? If yes, what two groups do you think? I think it could be offensive tackle, wide receiver, edge, or defensive line. I think it's going to be offensive tackle and defensive line. And I think the throwing a bunch of darts type thing, generally speaking, you are going to be better off with, like, say, a first-round pick and a second-round pick as opposed to a higher first-round pick, unless that first-round pick is like in the top 10 maybe, or maybe a little bit higher, because of the ability to maybe get like a superstar type. Other than that, the draft really does become kind of a crapshoot. There's varying degrees of talent there, but it's tough. I think that what you saw with the Tyreek Hill trade, I do think you see a shift and how the Chiefs are doing things to an extent, but it's not a complete shift because they're still willing to, trade up for guys that they like. They're still willing to trade for Kadarius Toney. So I think you're like what you saw with the Tyreek Hill trade was an attempt to find some balance, not just rely on superstars and Jags, as Seren is so fond of saying, but also trying to balance that out with cheap, solid talent. And that's, that's what allowed him to go up and get Trent McDuffie. And so, it's a really, really big deal, but there's got to be a balance there. And that's why, like, when I talk about Chris Jones, I tell people, one reason you can sign Chris Jones is because you didn't sign Tyreek Hill. And that's the balance there. You pick and choose which superstars you retain. Ethan Kenke says, I've heard some analysts say Mahomes' numbers drop a lot when he's pressured. Is that true? It doesn't feel right. Sure, his numbers drop, but they drop less than everyone else's. Every quarterback in the league has worse numbers when pressured. But Mahomes, generally speaking, and now I haven't looked specifically at the numbers for this year, honestly, generally speaking, his numbers drop less than everyone else's. Everyone's numbers are going to be worse when they're under pressure because every quarterback in the league we'll utilize Derek Carr as kind of like, the litmus test. You must be this tall to ride the roller coaster. When Derek Carr is under pressure, or let's say Kirk Cousins isn't under pressure, man, they can sling the ball. It's the pressure and how you navigate that changes things. Do you just get completely destroyed by it, or can you navigate it and be successful some of the time, or even much of the time? Mahomes falls into the latter category. So that it's one of those things that's factually accurate but contextually incomplete. Tom Allison asks, what am I missing? Why are the Chiefs dogs in the betting lines? The Eagles have had a great season. They've got star power all across, their offense, their defense. They're a really, really good team. And the Chiefs all year, they came into the year as a Super Bowl favorite in some ways. The betting lines and that kind of stuff, but also being considered being part of kind of rebuilding year. The defense has had its ebbs and flows. And so I just think you're seeing a sum of the parts of how a team is viewed across the entirety of the season. And plus, the playoffs really affect how people view teams. And the Eagles have just destroyed everyone in their path in the playoffs. Is there some context there? Sure. But that's what's happened. So, I don't think the Chiefs have been particularly disrespected by any of that. Ben Megenberg asks, is there a possibility the Chiefs do not pursue any current wide receivers in the roster due to being unavailable throughout the season? Could they flip the wide receiver room, maintaining only Toney and MVS? Well, they would obviously maintain Sky Moore as well. I think there's a possibility that you see them not keep Juju Smith-Schuster. I think if Smith-Schuster had been healthy all year, he was on his way to an 1,200 yard season and was a really great fit. Him and MVS, great compliments to one another alongside Travis Kelce. Staying healthy has been a problem, and I'm guessing that's going to play a pretty big role. But that's just my guess. He's been so good for the Chiefs, and he's helped them out with so many things. Just shaking my plexus here. But it is tough when you've got a guy who's not just unavailable for multiple games, but also is playing multiple games kind of nicked up. So if I were the Chiefs, I'd probably look a different direction, considering the price tag that I think he's going to demand next year. And not demand, but I mean, like when I say demand, I don't mean Juju Smith-Schuster's demanding it. I mean that what the market demands you pay him. I think it might make more sense to go elsewhere for that. Russell Stover, which Eagles lineman do you want Chris Jones to line up against for the majority of the snaps on Sunday? I want to see him take a little bit of a wider alignment, similar to what you saw against the Bengals. Now, one risk with that is Jalen Hurts will just take the snap and sprint straight forward. And so they're going to need to be attacking the A-gaps there to make sure that doesn't happen, because he's a gifted runner. But I think that he's better off against their guards. I am interested in how he performs. Jason Kelce is one of the best run blockers in the league. He's an incredible pass blocker as well. I would be curious to see one-on-one how he deals with Jones, given Jones' power, because Kelce, as great as he is an undersized center and has had issues dealing with power at times during his career. So it would be interesting to see Jones just straight up one-on-one, provided they can keep, help being slid his way from either one of the guards. I also do think it would be fascinating to see him go up against either of the tackles, just because against any tackle, he's such a unique type of matchup that he can give them some really serious problems. Their left tackle, who's become a very good left tackle, is huge, just a massive beast of a man, but he's never really dealt with someone like Jones because so few people have. One thing that people forget about the Eagles game last year is that Jones was getting pressure. It's just the coverage was so horrific that the ball was coming out just instantaneously. Salvatore Montalbano asks, how does the game plan look different without McCole Hardman? I think if Kadarius Toney's good to go, I don't think it looks very different. That's going to be the key thing, though. They really do need Kadarius Toney to be at 90% and to play most of the game. Sean Taff asked, who is going to be the unsung hero for the Chiefs in the Super Bowl? The unsung hero. I think, the problem is everyone's always looking for the unsung hero, so they become the sung hero, as it were. I think a guy that you could see making an impact without getting the same amount of publicity that you might expect would be Marquez Valdez-Scantling in terms of what the Eagles, what they saw on tape from the AFC Championship and what they do schematically. I think he might be someone that forces them to stay in too high more often than they like. They play a lot of quarters, and they're really good at it. And so I'm guessing they'll still play a lot of quarters. I don't think you're going to see as much single high there. But the Chiefs can make quarters kind of complicated given their ability underneath. So I think he's a guy that might mess with what they're doing schematically a little bit. Charles Mott asks, do you think this will be Mahomes' best Super Bowl yet? I do. He's the best he's ever been. Here's hoping he's at least 90% on the ankle. Sergeant Holka, Seth, has anyone run no huddle against the Eagles to great effect? Chiefs haven't typically needed to resort to these tactics, but it'd be interesting to know if it's a viable bullet in the chamber. I'm not sure, actually. The Chiefs generally don't, like you said, they don't generally resort to that. They like to win with what they have. I would love to see them do something like that, especially with Andy's early game script where they already know what they're kind of calling. I'd love to see them run no huddle and really push the issue and try to jack up the number of possessions in the game and try to mess with the Eagles defense, which is more of a win with personnel than win with scheme defense, in my opinion. So I don't know if that messes with them as much as it might with a normal defense because they're comfortable with the guys they have in there, and they should be. They're very good. Greg P says, with a poor 3rd-and-1 conversion rate, can you explain why they don't use the fullback more in new different ways? Generally speaking, when you bring in a fullback, what that accomplishes is it brings another guy into the box. And so you really, in your best case scenario, that fullback accounts for that linebacker, and it's ended up neutral. Now you're talking, new different ways. You need guys like Juice Check or something like that who can do a bunch of different things. And Burton isn't necessarily that guy. So I think that's why you're probably not seeing as much of that, just because, again, if you're using them traditionally, it's basically a 1-to-1, and your best case scenario is that it evened out. And then using them in kind of some different ways, you need a little bit of a more varied skill set than most fullbacks have. Jamarion asks, which receiver do you think we should go after in the offseason? What pass rusher do you think we should go after? Jamarion, I'm going to ignore that question because you asked another one, and we're dealing with the Super Bowl right now, my man. Just live in the present, my friend. Just live in the present. Jamarion asks, also, do you think Sky Moore will be good next year? He often open. Mahomes just doesn't see him because they don't have chemistry. I personally think that Moore is going to have a much larger role in the offense next year. I think the problem that they're currently having is one of trust and overlapping of skill set with Juju Smith-Schuster. I think you see them very, very close on multiple plays, and I think learning some of the sight adjustments is going to be really crucial for him this offseason. He shows the ability to separate a little bit. He shows some explosion. He shows smoothness in and out of his breaks. He shows he can deal with some physicality. So I think he shows the things that you need. He shows good hands. He shows what you need from a receiver to be good. I just think it's a big learning curve, and that just kind of is what it is, especially with his type of role in Reed's offense, as opposed to just being like a go ball type guy. Blake Doran says, most important wide receiver for the Super Bowl. I think Kadarius Toney. We've talked about this before. I think the ability to run some of their jet sweep stuff to try to slow down the pass rush is going to be pivotal in this game. I only have time for a couple more. Oh, I'm not going to get to all of them, but we're going to try. Danny Gershon says, have our linebackers shown they can handle what is likely to be an RPO-heavy Philly offense? Not on their own, no. What other defensive positions have to be at their best to force Philly to throw? The guys on the interior are going to have a monster game, and the edges are going to have to handle things extremely, extremely well. Now, fortunately, one thing Dunlap and Clark and Karlaftis have shown they can do is kind of handle some of that stuff. Karlaftis has the athleticism. Clark and Dunlap have the intelligence to do it, but they're going to need the guys all across the defensive line to perform very, very well because, yeah, that's been something of an issue for their current linebacker group. I'm just double checking. I'm supposed to be on the radio in 4 minutes. If you're wondering why I'm hurrying this up. Charles Van Doren says, I'm a huge fan of the Kelce podcast. Hey, me too. I wonder, however, if Jason gets a bit of a reputational boost because of being Travis's brother, especially this year with their awesome product. I don't remember him being considered best in the league prior to this year. Thoughts? He's always been in the conversation for one of the best, 2 or 3 in the league. And I think he's just been terrific this year. And so, I mean, that's kind of what happens. You had, in Tampa Bay, the center went down. And so I personally think he's always been right up there in the conversation. And this year, I think he's been as good as he's ever been. So that's kind of how it happens when guys have been that good for that long. And then they just continue with it. It's Chief season, says, I'm going to have time for 2 more. I'll have a follow-up if Chris Jones has multiple sacks. Do the Chiefs win the Super Bowl? I think they do. Follow-up, is a 80% Patrick Mahomes better than 100% Jalen Hurts? I think 80% Patrick Mahomes is better than basically every other quarterback in the league outside of 2 or 3. So I'd say he's the equivalent of Jalen Hurts, who's a phenomenal young quarterback. And that's a compliment for Jalen Hurts, even if Eagles fans might not view it that way. But we've just seen so much good from Patrick Mahomes. My call is coming in. It's a great day to be a Chiefs fan. Thanks for listening, you guys.